Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of July 25th, the 17th week in Ordinary Time. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, Haley. Good morning. And, last week, I think I did it a little bit after the fact, but I realized, it was halftime, meaning like halfway through the year, and we continue in Ordinary Time. Today, we will talk about the Olympics, which started Friday night, July 23rd, which is actually the same day that Ted Lasso season 2 is released. We'll talk about schools and how they celebrate the Olympians that maybe they've graduated and trained and formed, as we like to think. Color War, which sounds really fun. And then today's gospel, the loaves and fishes. So talk to me, Haley, as a swimmer, you must love the Olympics. Have you been tuning in to, what's going on in Tokyo?
Yes, we have. We started. So first of all, I'm sure everyone's heard me say this before. When you're a swimmer, when you are an athlete in an Olympic sport, the Olympics are it. This is the pinnacle of, any goal that any Olympic sport athlete has. Maybe if you're a cyclist, maybe the Tour de France is, golf is not an Olympic sport. So,
no, it is.
It's a newer one. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
It was in the early 20th century. It was an Olympic sport, and they brought it back, 4 years ago.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Back.
So it's back.
But I know what you mean. The majors are the stage for golfers, or like for tennis players, the Grand Slam. Yes.
Right. Yes. So, but, for swimmers, we have world championships, but, literally the Olympics are it. So it's been fun, but it seemed a little different this year. And I don't know if you're feeling that too. First of all, I'm just thrilled that they're playing. I'm thrilled they're competing. I was glad they postponed it from last year as opposed to canceling it altogether. But we started off watching the opening ceremonies on Friday night, and we did not get through all of it. And I'm not really sure why. It was a little strange, with the empty stadium. I've never really kind of understood or fully gotten into and embraced the performances that take place that need to be explained. So, you're watching something happening on a field and you have the commentary of what's actually happening, which, I always feel like if you have to explain it to me, they're not doing a very good job. I love the parade of athletes. I think that's a really exciting moment for an athlete. I have to imagine that it is.
Oh, I bet.
But it was also a little strange to see them parading in and waving. I guess they're waving to the cameras, waving to, their family at home, which is awesome. I would wave too. So I don't know what the different feeling is. Tokyo is a whole different time zone world, half a world away. So yes. I had seen all the social media pictures of kind of the athletes I know who are there. I'd seen their opening ceremony photos already. So it's a different vibe. I will continue to watch. It's exciting. These are dreams come true for all of these athletes. And you don't always get a glimpse into that. But it does feel a little different. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I hear you. I agree. I don't know. I think Tokyo is I'm in California, so 16 hours ahead. When I went there, I just remember being a little bit discombobulated about the time and trying to do the math. But I don't know if I've grown weary of kind of the detractors, the things that, this athlete is not going to be there because of COVID. For example, Coco Gauff, man, that's a loss. She's an awesome, American. She's one of my favorite tennis players. Her parents were going to be able to go because she is under 18 and, had a chance for the gold. So you keep hearing these stories of who won't be there and what is different, these cardboard beds or, whatnot. And even just life for the Olympians. Yes. And the games are the Olympiad, right? Or
correct.
What's an Olympiad versus, right?
So
I need the language here.
Yeah. So the Olympiad, I believe, is the 4 years, kind of it's the 23rd Olympiad. So it's kind of.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
It's not the 23rd. I made that up, but.
But yeah. So I wish, we would take away from that and focus on the stories and the athletes who are there. And I have certainly noticed schools, for example, my high school, Carondelet, on social media is promoting past Olympians. So Natalie Coughlin, one of the most decorated swimmers, she's awesome. She went to Carondelet, swam for Carondelet, as did Tiffany Roberts, 95 from Carondelet. She was a soccer player on the U.S. women's, soccer team. Stanford University is certainly proud of the number of Olympians they have in the games. And obviously at Notre Dame, we are too. So I thought it was interesting because, then they try and dramatize like how many American gold medals there are. And this is the first time we haven't had a gold in, X number of years or something. But Lee Kiefer, who is a U.S. fencer, she's a Notre Dame alumna. She's the first Olympic gold medal. And she's actually a two-time Olympian. She's probably this is what it says on Fighting Irish Media. She says it's arguably one of the most accomplished student athletes at Notre Dame. So she graduated from Notre Dame. She's been a number one fencer in the world, many years. I think she's a 4-time NCAA champion. So I've shown her story in class about fencing, and the opening line is very provocative. It says fencing is beautiful. And you see the sword and you see the jab and it's very dramatic and it's so cool. So I'll definitely link that. I don't think of fencing as beautiful, but I know what she means. And I like that about sports, that there really is beauty in football, even though it's so savage or violent, I should say, but there is also beauty in it. So congratulations to Lee Kiefer and to Fighting Irish Fencing Program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, I think we all do that. All of us individually, all of us collectively, either as a school or an area, our hometown. It's kind of fun to support those you kind of know. We certainly don't know any of these people, but we have connections to them. And, there was the winner of the men's 400 IM is from Baltimore. So, of course, that's big news around here. Yeah. And, we're all, both you and I, following the Notre Dame athletes who were there. So it is kind of fun to have a connection. Byron Spruill is he's the president of the NBA. He played football at Notre Dame, but he's over there, with men's basketball. Of course, they had an interesting loss recently. Same with women's soccer. Kate Markgraf, she's the first general manager of women's soccer. She's over there as well. They had a tough loss last week, and rebounded pretty well. But so it's just kind of fun to have those connections, whether it's a high school or an area or somebody that you kind of know their name because you went to college together. It makes it more personal, but they're fun to watch.
I was going to say, it reminds me, my friend was on a flight from Denver to here, San Francisco, and he was on the flight with the U.S. boxing team. And he said that people cheered and clapped for the team. They made the announcement on the flight. I thought that was so cool. And I said, is it men and women? He said, yes. And he was just so pro Olympics. And it was such a great story coming back to this, maybe the narrative for so long had been 80% of the Japanese people do not want the Olympic Games, and again, the reality is very tough, but he was it was so energetic and such a positive experience. He's it was great to celebrate them. So we get to celebrate these athletes, and why should we not,
Yeah, you make a good point. The narrative needs to be the athletes and not COVID, who's there, who's not there. We need to kind of bring it back to sport. Yeah. Which is,
one of the athletes that's there is Jessica Springsteen. Her parents, Patty Scalfa and Bruce Springsteen, are, incredible musicians. Her mom is a good musician in her own right. Her dad, I have this program, it's from the Born in the USA tour from 1984, 1985, and it lists his nickname. It says the hardest working man in show business. And I was thinking about Jessica and, she's competing in equestrian. I will probably learn the event, Haley, as a result of this. I know that there's jumping. I maybe a little bit more about it, but where she's from in New Jersey is known for, horses and horse training, Colts Neck, New Jersey, Rumson area. And she she was a collegiate athlete. She went to Duke and she was an equestrian there. And now she's in the Olympics. And I'm sure there are detractors who are saying, well, this is a woman of privilege, which is true. I mean, she is. Her parents are, incredibly wealthy. And you don't become an Olympian because of your wealth. Like she's had to put in the time, she's had to put in the effort. It's also, I know you met Christopher Reeve in your lifetime, and like had his accident based on like being on a horse. Like it's not without danger. And I'm sure she's fallen many times, but I have been thinking about the example she must have seen in her parents, their work ethic, and it had to have rubbed off on her. And that's how I would like to give her all the credit, because she's done it. She didn't have to do it. She is an Olympian and a very engaging one. I saw her on the Today Show. She looks just like her mom and dad as a combo. Beautiful woman, and just so proud that she's representing the United States. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Another, we stay out of politics on this podcast. We like to be Switzerland here. Um, but there are, I have heard some grumblings that people are not as interested in some of these teams who are taking a political stand through their sport. Women's soccer, the women's soccer team comes to mind. There are people who are letting the women's soccer players, that whatever their personal political feelings are, get in the way of actually being able to cheer for them, and that's upsetting. We need to support our athletes and support the flag and what that represents, and that's free speech.
Yeah.
And but there are some Americans who
Yeah.
for whom that's very difficult for them to go ahead and embrace
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
teams. So that's another side that
Yeah.
hopefully we'll overcome.
Navigates those lines, right? Because I have wondered, for example, in the WNBA, they've been very like outspoken on, gay and lesbian rights, and for people who may have a different point of view, what is your ability like on a team? You don't want to ever take away from the team. You want to build the team. And so do we allow for many points of view? I don't know. I mean, again, respect, dignity, like all these things that are fundamental. And how can we let each other be in that space? And to make a statement or to take a stand or to not take a stand is seen as both,
Taking a
and
stand.
it's polarizing. Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
So
Unfortunately,
our wish for these athletes is that they can just
Yeah.
go compete, enjoy the experience, because for most of them this will be, it's a once in a lifetime shot. So I'm always sad when that's taken away from someone for whatever reason. I did mention last week I was going to watch the Israeli national Olympic baseball team. I did go do that. It was super fun.
Cool.
Yep, they are off to the Olympics this weekend. Of course, baseball is a sport for the first time. I have a friend who's coaching that team. It's primarily made up of Jewish Americans, so Major League Baseball players, minor league baseball players. So they are mostly American, but it's the first time that baseball's been in the Olympics, and the Israel national team was excited to qualify. So again, it's kind of fun to have a team to follow that I would normally not take interest in just because of that personal connection. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It always draws us in. Now, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
I would like to know what percentage of athletes are competing for a country in which they are not a national. So, we use the word like U.S. national, Israeli national, meaning you live and grow up there. So it'd be interesting, like if you are competing for Canada and you're not competing for the U.S. because you have citizenship, or, again, by their birthright, they have, Israeli citizenship, as a Jew. So I'd be curious, like, is it 20% of Olympians? Probably 10, 5. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's that high. It's pretty common I shouldn't say it's pretty common. It happens every Olympics in swimming,
Yeah.
I know for sure. Even this year, there's a boy from Annapolis, Tyler Christensen. He swims for Notre Dame. He's there representing Panama. Now, I would imagine one of his parents is from Panama, so he has dual citizenship. I'm guessing that. There was a girl I swam with, same thing. One of her parents was from the Dominican Republic, so she was able to swim on behalf of that country. I know, another guy I swam with at Notre Dame, his mother was Brazilian. His sister swam, actually, it's kind of an amazing story. She represented Brazil in the 1996 Olympics. She swam at Stanford and then qualified for the U.S. Olympic team to represent the United States in the 2000 Olympics. So she actually different Olympics represented different countries. It's a lot easier to make an Olympic team from another country. Certainly in swimming, it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
U.S. swimming Olympic trials is probably the fastest meet in the world. It's usually faster than the Olympics because you have so many strong Americans. So I don't think it's a large number, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens. But
Yeah.
usually you have to
Good.
have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an
Yeah, it's
interesting
just be
sidebar.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. People don't know. I mean, they might, but like, for example, 21% of the NBA is foreign born. So, I mean, that's 1 in 5 players
Yeah,
is,
that's pretty high.
playing in this country. So, again, it'd be interesting to see, yeah, what percentage of that. And even on, yeah, how many Americans are playing basketball for another country. So, anyway,
Well,
sorry about your sons.
yeah, I know. Speaking of basketball, that was it was tough.
Yeah.
But I listened to, it was a very long, it was 13 minutes. That's kind of, that's long for me to capture my
Yeah.
attention for a post-game press conference. But I am such a big fan of Monty Williams and what he's done with the Suns and just of him and personally and what he's done personally and professionally and, his own experience and career. And so I listened to his post-game press conference and, he was pretty subdued. He was clearly upset. He got very emotional at the end, and that's kind of what shut down the conference. He couldn't talk about it. He was devastated for his players.
Yeah.
And there's so many great pictures that have been around on social media. This is a coach that loves his players. He was not coaching to win for himself, and that was very clear. He was coaching because he wanted his athletes to win.
Yeah.
I mean, if his team could have won and he lost, he would have done that. And there's such power and grace in losing,
Yeah.
and that is a gift that he has
Yeah.
that he has shared with his players. And there was probably no one more devastated than him that they lost, and yet no one with more grace and humility
Yeah.
when he lost. And that's a remarkable coach. And we don't see that as much as I would like. And I worry we're not raising these next generations of athletes that way. We live in a world where everybody gets a trophy and everybody wins and nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings. And that's not raising a generation of athletes who will move into coaching, some of them, to then be a coach like Monty Williams. They're going to be more a coach like, I don't know, Bob Knight or somebody who's, maybe we wouldn't want our kids to be around. I'm not going to pick on him, but it's really unfortunate because there is so many lessons to be learned when you lose. And
Yeah.
sometimes those are the most important lessons and
Yeah.
the more important
Yeah.
lessons. And so how do we do that? How do we raise these kids to know what it's like to lose and to lose with grace
Yeah.
and to lose being happy for the side that wins? That's really hard to do. And we
Yeah.
can't teach adults that. And we're not teaching our young kids that, but some are. So my son, as you know, Edward, he comes home next weekend. We're very excited. He's been gone for a long time.
Yeah.
They have their camp has what they call Color War, and it is 4 days of super intense competition. They divide the camp up into 2 teams. It is hardcore. It is 4 intense days. They are all in. It's sports, it's trivia, it's Jenga, it's cooking, it's plays, it's relays. It runs the gamut. You don't have to be a great athlete to participate. And they go all in. And when Color War is over, you are no longer allowed to wear your team colors. And one team wins and one team loses. And they are crushed when they lose. And they are thrilled and cheering when they win. And it lasts about 3 minutes. And then they're all hugging each other and happy for their teammates and happy for the other team that won and happy for their cousins that won or their friends. And it is crushing to me as a parent when, Edward's side loses, but that's how they learn. That's what our kids need these days because they're not getting that. Some are, but how are we going to raise coaches like Monty Williams? We're going to send them to camp and experience color war, and they're going to learn. They're going to learn how to lose, and maybe that's a silly thing that we want our kids to learn, but they're going to lose.
I think it's important just to point the way and show an example like Monty Williams. I think that's part of it. I also think it's one of the better arguments for why be a Christian today, because I think to be a Christian is to be countercultural. And you're saying, like, Haley, I can't tell you how often I hear people say, everybody gets a trophy and nobody likes what this culture is. But then we're aware of it, we've named it, but who is changing it? Who's saying, I'm going to be the parent who's like, I'm going to do it different? You know what I mean? Or it's going to be tough. It's going to be divided. And, but I don't know. I mean, is it going to take a bunch of us like conspiring to stop giving these trophies and awards? Like at some point we have to just say, I'm going to be countercultural. And I think, again, to me, that's what being a Christian is to be countercultural, is to, renounce ourselves in the favor of something greater. And the more we can, and I know Monty Williams is a man of faith, like he talks about it openly. So part of me thinks this is not unrelated. And, maybe that's where a deep prayer life could help a person, because it does take some inner resolve and some commitment to being different and to holding your ground and believing that this is the right way to be. So, I think it's great that this camp, whatever they've done to allow young people to have the real competition, it doesn't sound like it's compromised.
Oh, no.
And yet they can also, like, both can be true. They can be happy for the victor, upset for themselves, and still love the competition. I mean, that to me is a win right there.
It's a huge win. And I will post a link to the blog that they write about it, because that's what they're teaching them. They're teaching them that there is success in failure, and that it's a great thing to have. So that's a great time to move into our spiritual stew. I'm happy. Today's gospel doesn't always happen, but my spiritual stew comes from today's gospel. And it's interesting sometimes when I'm in mass, I listen, my mind wanders from time to time. I'm sure everybody's does, but there's something about a gospel that you've heard before. That's a common one that tends to grab my attention. And so, of course, today we have the Gospel of John. It's the bread and fishes story. I'm sure I call it mainstream. I'm not sure it's mainstream, although I think most Christians have heard it. Maybe non-Christians are familiar with it as well. When Jesus, of course, feeds, the thousands of people with the small number of bread and fish. So I pay attention. For whatever reason, when I've heard the gospel before, it's like, oh, okay, it's this one. So then I pay attention more. Why is that? Why does it grab my attention? And I thought about this. What does that mean? One, it means I probably need to pay attention more often. Two, it means I need to probably listen to the stories that I haven't heard, because this is one I knew. But I also started thinking about what does the bread and fishes story mean in my life? Obviously, it doesn't mean that, all of a sudden I need to turn more, increase bread, feed more people. That's clearly not to be taken literally. And yet in some ways it is. So I have thought about this. My mind did wander a little bit during the homily, but here's what my takeaway is from this. So tell me what you think.
Okay.
We need to be happy with what we have, because it's enough. And if we worry about it not being enough, we shouldn't focus on worrying about it not being enough, right? In the gospel, they're worried that we only have so many loaves, we only have so many fish. How are we going to do this? They're all worried about that. And Jesus is saying it's enough. It's enough. And I think for me, that's my takeaway from this week's gospel is I can look at what I have, not necessarily bread and fish, whatever aspect of my life I want to look at, and not the goal. What Jesus is saying is don't look at it and think this isn't enough, right? Whatever I have, it's enough. And whatever I have, it's going to give me what I need as long as I have my faith there. So I don't know. That's my interpretation of this week's gospel. That wasn't, sometimes I love it when the priest talks about the gospel. Sometimes the priest never talks about the gospel. I guess I always thought that was the point. of the homily,
It
but
is. It
I didn't
is.
get much
As a
guidance.
teacher,
I didn't get much guidance this week. But so that's my
yeah,
takeaway, right? Jesus is saying this is enough. You only have
yeah,
2 loaves, you're good. I to be happy with what we have and to know that with Jesus in our lives, with our faith, what we have is plenty.
yeah. What a great takeaway, Haley. Thank you for that. So it's funny because when I was reading over our notes, I wrote down the word sufficient because that is what stuck out for me. I went at 8 a.m. this morning and they said, there was enough for everybody and there was enough that they were full. It was like, and I think about dinner and, do you prepare enough? And it's a terrible feeling when, you prepare a meal and you're not sure that it's enough. It's like, oh, I hope there's enough for everybody. But when you have enough and not too much, it's just it's so great. But, what we have been given so much. And this gospel, which is in all, it's in the synoptics, it's that important that Jesus wants us to hear that message. Yeah, 5 fishes and 5 loaves, right? And it fed them all. I mean, it's incredible. So I think that's a great message and a great takeaway to consider. Yeah, I think we do have all we need. I think it compromises our happiness when we think, we don't have X, Y, Z. And it's, again, we're talking about our culture. It's so easy to just see what we don't have as opposed to what we do have.
Right. Right.
So thank you for that. And as a teacher, hey, I can speak to that. Oh my God, when you, okay, today's lesson is going to be about this, but you really haven't prepared enough, speaking of enough. And so you go something else. But the gospel for me, there was a missionary priest from Nigeria, and he linked it to the message of the patron saint of the parish, St. Vincent de Paul. And he used the line from Matthew 25, verse 40, and whatever you do for the least of my people, that you do unto me. Okay, here we are talking about, the people are hungry, they're going to Jesus, they've been given. And then really our message because we've been given a lot, we have a responsibility to give to others was kind of his challenge. And he talked about Nigeria, how his country is half Muslim, which I didn't know. Mm. And many people are Christian and they live in harmony, and how he and his own family, not everybody was Christian. And it's just, my sense was that the people really support one another, but he has this vocation, and through the schools, they've really been able to educate people in the faith. And how a little can really go a long way in terms of American dollars. So he was fundraising, which I didn't mind because I loved learning about, his people, his country. But the reality of like how little they have and how if we can give, it can really literally feed people and then nourish them through their faith. But he didn't just say the words, he actually sang them. And I was kind of annoyed at Mass because I like my 8 a.m. Mass because there's not a lot of singing. And so this cantor is back and I was like, oh God, it's going to be a longer Mass. And then, so the cantor is separate than the priest. But then when he got up there, he smiled. He has this gorgeous smile. And then when he sang, he had just such a beautiful voice. And it was like, really, I wish the people, myself included, had joined him in singing because he brought such joy. So I want to pray for him and his vocation and his ministry and his missionary work. But it reminded me a couple of years ago when there was the shooting at Charleston's Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. For me, that shooting was just, it was so hard because it was like several Black elders that had gathered in prayer, and the shooter was a white man that came in and prayed with them and then took their lives. And to me, that's just diabolical. I still, Sandy Hook is obviously tragic. All of them are tragic, all of them. But this one, for whatever reason, just got me. And President Obama spoke at the memorial service and gave the eulogy, and he sang Amazing Grace. It was unbelievable. So I thought of President Obama when this Nigerian priest was singing, because they were good orators, very talented in their voice, but Man, I had no idea Barack could sing, and he went low on Amazing Grace. Like, you got to hear it. You expect him to go one direction, he goes low. It is so good. And I just, now when I hear that song, I think of that church, and I think of Amazing Grace is obviously a great, it's a song this country loves, but I do think of those people and that loss. So maybe my takeaway this week will be to continue praying for, Amazing Grace in the world, essentially.
Yeah, and we'll have to post a link to that.
Yeah.
That's where, music is so powerful. And, just as, when you talked about your priest and even, President Obama saying the words are one thing, but it's really powerful to hear them in song. And there's something about music that can be very moving. Even we talked about Bruce Springsteen a few minutes ago, right? There's just something about some songs that just invoke an emotion and a reaction.
Yeah.
That's really pretty powerful. So one of my takeaways will be to look that up. I hadn't seen that. I didn't know that. Maybe I did at the time and I've forgotten, but it doesn't sound like I would forget it if I heard it. So I will have to look up President Obama singing that. And I'm going to pray for this week for all of us to really seek and find peace in knowing that what we have is enough. And I'm thinking more of material things, right? Not so much more spiritually, but to pray also for those who are hurting, to know that what they have is enough. And I think that's, I talk about that a lot when I'm speaking just in general, right? When you talk about who we are and who we want to be when life is going really well, that's easy to see that and feel like we have enough. But when we are really challenged, and I've got two friends right now who are really hurting in tough ways, and their families are falling apart, their marriages are falling apart, and I'm thinking of them in particular, praying for them to know that they're enough themselves. And, if they can, and they're both, faith-filled people, and hopefully they'll be able to hear this gospel today and rely on their faith and know that, even during these challenging times, with what we have with our faith is enough, although it's harder to see when life is tough. So there's still a lot of hurt out there, recent hurts and old hurts that still fester. And so we keep those in mind as we move through this week too. Along with the Olympians, we pray everyone is safe, that everyone continues to be able to compete, that the message continues to be the athletes and not everything else in this crazy world.
Yeah. Well, and even if that's just you and me and, our listeners, being that person in their, communities and local circles, sharing that story. And, as you were talking about your friends, that, I thank you for acknowledging the place in which we stand. It's one thing to be like, it's enough when we're in a, good space, consolation. But when we're in desolation, that you have all the tools you need, you have the faith. That is faith, I think, right there. So let's pray for those people, and Amazing Grace finds them.
Amen. Well, thank you, Anna. I hope you have an awesome week. I know you're headed back to work, so we look forward to catching up next week as you return to, start preparing for the fall. It's still summer. We're only a little bit over halfway through, but I know a lot of us are looking forward to the fall. So it's going to be enough that today we don't need to look forward too much. We're going to enjoy this last day of the week, but we hope everyone has a great week as well.
Thanks so much. Have a great week.
You too.